Hey guys, my name is Bryce, and today I'm going to do a video on my mekk-knights of the month sort of deck profile. I did one a little while ago, but I thought I'd give a bit of an update due to some key players being added, namely the fact that this is being shot now where mekk-knight Morningstar is available, and I made a few other sort of tweaks based on how things played out at locals I went to recently. So to start off, we have 3 Effect Veiler. Not only is it good just as a standard hand trap, but it is a tuner as a level 1, and it's light, and that'll come into play fairly soon for the rest of this deck. We also have Honest. So worst case scenario, I believe it can work where you can have send this card from your hand to the graveyard, the monster gains attack equal to the attack of the monster it's battling until the end phase. You can, in a very stupid way, actually have Effect Veiler crash into an opponent's monster if you're stuck. Only happened once, but hey, it's doable with this combo. I want to have as many light monsters in this deck as I possibly can. Moving on from the 2 Honest, I have 3 mekk-knight Abrams. I got 2 of the standard and 1 of the sort of fancy limited edition ones, because I've got 3 rescue rabbits in this, and actually one of these happens to be one of the super rares as well, or the limited edition anyway. Reason for this is, oh my gosh, if you can have a normal summon available, being able to start with 2 mekk-knights, special summoning a third one is really easy through taking 2 Abrams, going into Morningstar, and then from there special summoning underneath if you have another spell or trap, and then immediately can go into Spectrum Supreme for minimal effort. So that's really effective to use, just considering these are so available. And plus too, if you're worried about going first anyway, just having a 2000 attack normal monster is not ideal, but you're also not completely stuck from being attacked. So that's useful to have. I've got a feeling the surprise will be lost, but I've actually been playing Vanity's Fiend with this, where basically I special summon mekk-knights as best as I can, and then tribute one of them off to not only feed the graveyard for having mekk-knight, I can banish for effect, but also just having all these other, sort of fairly strong monsters. Vanity's Fiend is kind of a decent floodgate for, if I'm not, needing a normal summon, for that turn, it's quite useful to bring out quite easily in something that you'd normally never anticipate. So this is totally up to you guys if you want to splash it in, but I've been pretty entertained by what I can sort of lock down, at least temporarily, until some back row takes it out usually. Next I have mekk-knight Yellow Star. Speaking of back row, this is the one that takes out spells and traps. It's got like a actually pretty decent body on it for having high defense and offense. That's nothing to laugh at either. I like running 2 of these, but not more typically. Next I have Orange Sunset. Purely for the defense. The offense is somewhat useful if I have one last mekk-knight in my hand which I can't bring out. The fact I can bring it out during the battle phase still is quite useful for this, so it's a great way to still have kind of like one final attack if I've been able to clear the board out enough, or just need a few more monsters on the field. It's way better than I think what the green one can do, at least in my opinion from what I found. Next I have 3 Red Moon. This is primarily because at the locals I'm playing at, there isn't a ton of protection from targeting and being damaged, or at the very least the fact I can bring it out so consistently, it can take out the early targets that can be targeted as opposed to boss monsters. Anyway, it's nice to have, plus it's got decent offense on it as well. Next to that I have a excellent new addition, which is Purple Nightfall. I'm really lucky that I got this potentially before it might be revealed that this is a secret rare that might not come out actually from the Megatins, so I think I'm glad I jumped on that. Whether I'm right or wrong, at least I'm happy to have them now, and it's an excellent target for World Legacy's memories, whether it's on my turn or on my opponent's. Just for getting resources that I want is really fantastic. And the next candidate I usually select is Indigo Eclipse, because as soon as I'm able to add this to my hand, special summon it into the column I need, and hop it out of there so I can bring in another mekk-knight in its place. I run 3 even though this is the stronger one and it brings consistency. This one actually helps me, you know, make room for the other mekk-knights that I want to get on the board. So it's quite crucial to have. Also by having, you know, many level 8s actually makes them great candidates for you know, a well-known draw card that I'll reveal in a minute. Next I have Instant Fusion at 3. Again, this is one that I don't even need to get a normal summon out for to you know, be able to set something up for having in my extra monster zone. And for that I can either use it to, you know, get a monster out to disrupt my opponent, or if it's the very first turn, it just gets something up in my upper column, and you know, as long as I have a spell or trap to set, I've got, you know, at least one mekk-knight to begin with. So it's useful for that, for, you know, a cheap cost of 1,000 life points. So I run 3 just to avoid sticky situations. Next I also have Called by the Grave at 2. Right now the games that I'm playing, it just has plenty of targets, so that's useful to use, especially even against like a few hand traps that get thrown at me. Next I have Trade-In, which is what I had for reference for the level 8s. Great to be able to draw that and have mekk-knights in the grave. Next I have Monster Reborn. Should I chuck a mekk-knight in the grave that I want to bring back? I have 2 World Legacy Key. Definitely have 3 World Legacies Memory. Gosh, this is great to have as any monster I want, basically. There's so few restrictions aside from just, you know, not being able to special summon from the extra deck unless it's a mekk-knight. So you have to be careful of that, but otherwise it's fantastic to use. I have Twin Twisters and Raigeki, just because you never know. These are always kind of good to have. Next I have Quaking Mirror Force. This one I use only one of, but it's great if I want to kind of keep those columns lined up with something, and particularly if I have Indigo Eclipse, be able to always have a reliable column to bring up in. The fact if I have Spectrum Supreme able to attack through, you know, another one of the openings of columns, it doesn't matter if my opponent has other monsters on the field if I can attack directly, so it's actually nice for me to have my opponent at a disadvantage to not use effects and also not be able to link off stuff. And then to World Legacy Whispers, just because it's not going to be a huge shock to my opponents that, oh, they have to, you know, play around columns where I have something set. For people who have a continuous spell card, there's some sort of floodgate set up. You know, from one bit of a weight, it's fine to use, but it's also a nice surprise for the attack bonus, even if it's only temporary. Now I'm going to go to the extra deck, starting with 2 Spectrum Supremes. This is what I was talking about with the advantage of, you know, if I can incapacitate my opponent in something that's other than what's in this column here, being able to attack directly with 3,000 is fantastic. It has a series of other great benefits, and thanks especially to Morningstar, it's easier now to special summon than ever. Another new excellent addition to the mekk-knight stack, which is Morningstar. You can see the effect. It's just wonderful to have at least run 1, which is the only one I have my hands on now, but I might even try and fit into depending on if I, you know, change this in any certain way. Next I have Hyper Psychic Blaster, which is actually attainable with Effect Veiler. I have lots of level 8 Psychics, and then I just need the level 1 Tuner, so if I'm able to special summon out one of the mekk-knights and use my normal summon to bring out Veiler, I can actually do a Synchro Summon for this, which basically, if you're not familiar, it does piercing for defense, and actually I get to gain the life points from that difference. It's much more useful going into time than anything else, but even if it's your first game, it's still useful to bring out. For these next XYZ monsters, they also are quite powerful and relatively easily attainable. So I have Felgrand, and I also have Dark Knight of the Underworld. I'm a fan of both of these guys. I also have Big Eye as another sort of massive body to have that can, you know, take control of monsters once I'm sort of finished getting the columns I want. I also have Utopia the Lightning with number 39 Utopia. If I see a giant monster and I've got a Rescue Rabbit ready, I'm just ready to go into the 2 Abrams and run over that. Next I have Palladi Dynamo. This does fill the requirements for having the 2 Abrams. Not quite as utility based as what I might have with Utopia, but if there is a situation that calls for it, I'm ready with something a little different. Next I have Transcode Talker. This one's considerably more, I would say, situational, especially considering I have 2 Spectrum Supremes that might not totally be necessary, but one thing I can do is, if it's on my turn, I've got Spectrum Supreme in the graveyard, and I've got enough material, which is not that difficult with so many special summons in this game. I can bring this out and bring Spectrum Supreme into the column of it and actually use the effect. Send one other card you control in this card's column to the graveyard and special summon one mekk-knight monster from your deck in defense position. So that's automatically bringing this back from the grave, getting rid of this to get it out of the column, and I can actually bring a mekk-knight into one of these other columns to get some more effects, so that's useful to have. Next I have mekk-knight and a pair of Thousand Eyes Restrict and a Millennium Eyes Restrict. That basically is just serving the purpose for why I have the instant fusion to set up a column on my first turn and, for a bit of a cost, be able to bring out a mekk-knight. Otherwise, I can bring this out, see if I can set up another column first, then set up with Thousand Eyes, take control of the other monster, and then I can even go into mekk-knight to actually get a more permanent advantage going on the board. And also Millennium Eyes Restrict is not super unusual to bring out either, so I'm happy to have that in any case. And if I have a slightly more grindy game, because this is more control based, which I try to avoid because I want to be as aggressive with this as possible, at least I don't run out of targets for instant fusion. So that covers everything for the extra deck. So with the cards to consider, this is an extra section I want to sort of highlight. I actually like being able to splash in the Master Cerebus engine, I guess you could call it. It's level 8, which is a great target for trade-in, as well as the fact that it can just in any of the columns that you have for back row that are open between pendulums, destroy itself, add Jackal to your hand. You can play Jackal in the pendulum zone, destroy itself, and special summon out the Master Cerebus. Now, even if you don't play a lot of spells, it's useful to have suddenly a monster in your extra monster zone. You're able to do a column with it. It's even got higher attack than any of your other mekk-knights, kind of in regular stat. It's a light actually, which is again helpful for having Honest should you happen to have it. And if you do happen to play a lot of spells, or if your opponent does, you can even just have this last and not link into Morningstar, for example, and just have a pretty decent boss monster in it. So I like running that. Also saying that as a spell counter fan, so that might just be coming from bias. Next, I've got a few monsters that are a little less conventional. You may have seen this suggested online less seriously, but it's still potentially a feature where if you are going first in your, after your first victory, sliding these in to special summon it out, first off, add a token to your opponent's side of the field in whatever column you want. It's a pretty nice setup that you can have, and the fact that you can actually use this as tribute fodder for a level 5 or level 6 that you have is also useful to have just for mekk-knights in general. So you can have up to 3 of those. I have Krebums. This helps me get into the Hyper Psychic Blaster if I've got a lot of level 7 mekk-knights, but it's certainly not necessary. But it is also nice that if you're really desperate somehow, it's got a bit of built-in protection, at least from battle. I also have another odd psychic choice, which is Psychic Snail. Easily forgettable. However, the fact that you can choose one of your bigger mekk-knight monsters to attack twice, I don't know, if you're able to bring it out, I bet Spectrum Supreme would definitely appreciate being able to attack directly twice, but otherwise it's just a pretty decent normal summon for 1900 attack. But yeah, considering you're able to bring out much larger monsters in this deck, it's nice to be able to select those. Now you do have Green Horizon in here, but like I said before, it's what it lacks in the being able to special summon out immediately sort of feature. Being able to add stuff from graveyard to your hand isn't the worst thing in the world. Next I also have 2 Jinzo. Why? Because again, same thing with why I've had success with being able to have Vanity's Fiend out. If I'm going against Altergeist or something like that, locking down traps is a pretty strong thing, especially for a deck that doesn't rely too much on traps, so in this case you're not being held back too much. Here's more of the Green Horizons. There are 2 Legacy Scars that I happen to own. I also do have a Terraforming if I need to, have the 3rd copy, basically. It's not fantastic, but I also definitely see the value in, being able to cycle through stuff and get mekk-knights in the graveyard to, use the banish effect and everything. The attack bonus is, not necessary, but I'm happy at least it's there. Speaking of which, with so many level 8s, Future Glow can actually give a reasonable, consistent boost to all my psychics, which is nice. But I wouldn't use this in anywhere that's not more than casual, I would say. I got another World Legacy Whispers if I'm really hating on spells and things like that. Here's also where I'm getting into more sort of niche psychic-specific support, which still works with the mekk-knights. You have Telepathic Power, but the much more aggressive one, which I prefer, is Psy-Curse. Both of these just have benefits too. If your opponent does manage to attack over for battle, this will punish them by destroying it and either give you life points or, damage their life points. Psychic Overload, I've tried initially, but I actually would suggest against it, just because you want to keep mekk-knights in the graveyard, unless you have a whole bunch of them later on in the game. Even if it's for drawing, it's a trap that lets you draw. It's much better just to run another trade-in. I've got the Solemn Warnings and their monster tribute equivalents, which is Mind Over Matter. In fact, again, you got a bunch of almost free psychics available to tribute off. If you're risking running into time, it's much better to pay the cost of monsters as opposed to life points, just due to the to the time restrictions that you have for life points and everything. But that finally wraps it up for my deck profile of the new mekk-knights for this month. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.